Hi everybody, Zach Keenan here for Devil's Digest alongside our publisher, Hode Rubino. The two of us, just like the Arizona State Sun Devils, are getting set for our second road trip up to the great state of Utah. Arizona State fans and the Sun Devils hoping for a different result. And I think this time at Rice-Eccles, it's safe to say that the environment won't be too different, and it certainly won't be any less subdued than it was at LaVell Edwards Stadium when we were up at BYU.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Zach. I think just 45 minutes down the freeway, ASU and Provo experienced a very, very loud environment, and they definitely had some issues dealing with that, even though, as we talked back then, when you look closely at the game, it definitely was in the grasp of ASU. 16 penalties, a defense that played nearly lights out in the second half. There definitely were opportunities over there for ASU to play better and really to come out there with the win. But I don't know if I would call that BYU loss a wake-up call, but it is obviously the only loss to date for the Sun Devils. And if there were some painful, necessary lessons to be learned, you definitely hope that whatever you took away from that contest, you can implement Saturday at Utah, because like you said, the atmosphere is going to be really the same. And now you also have the added element of the Aaron Lowe tragedy, the former Utah player who died tragically in a house party weeks ago, and this is actually the first home game for the Utes since that incident. They're going to have a tribute video before the game starts. Utah's going to wear decals on their helmets, obviously. So there's just definitely going to be even a heightened some sense of emotion, and not just because they're coming off a big win at USC, but also the fact that the team is definitely going to be amped up. That in turn is really going to help the crowd to be amped up quite well. And for ASU, just to really block out the noise, even though they're not coming as an underdog, they're coming in as a slight favorite, but you feel that peripherally around the game, there's a lot of elements that may go against ASU. And again, you can look back at that BYU game and how well or how not so great ASU handled the elements then. So it's really going to be imperative for ASU mentally to be in a much better mindset, and during the game be able to handle those elements much better. I think one thing that is definitely worth mentioning, and I don't know if we talked about it too much in our video pieces, but we definitely talked about it a lot in my private message board, is the fact that BYU, because they had a former ASU staffer on their coaching staff, did actually have a different way of signaling plays into the offense. So aside from the noise, you had Jaden Daniels really using a wristband for the first time. In hindsight, I don't think there was enough preparation for that scheme leading up to the BYU game. And ASU obviously did have the so-called cupcakes to really try that system before the rubber met the road in Provo, trying to implement that. So now that ASU, by all accounts, is probably going to go back to the just normal hand signaling from the sidelines, and Jaden Daniels will not use a wristband. You like to think that that's probably one major difference that really can help ASU, something that definitely did not help them was the other system at Provo. So again, there's definitely a lot of elements for ASU to deal with. It's not going to be an easy environment at all, but you hope that what they experienced just a month ago, really not too far from Salt Lake City, can really serve them well on Saturday night.
We'll begin our preview of Utah with the offense. And before the season started, on our staff roundtable, I went on record and I went ahead and said that Utah was my pick to win the Pac-12. And while lately they have had a good run at it, I also said that it would be done behind the hands of Charlie Brewer, the quarterback transfer from Baylor. He's no longer with the program, Hode, and it seems like the offense hasn't missed him all too much, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, if you talk about hindsight here, Charlie Brewer probably should never been the starter for Utah. It was just an element that did not mix well at all with the offense. Cameron Rising, who did replace Charlie Brewer as a starter, is somebody who has a much bigger degree of comfort and just familiarity with the coaching staff, with the wide receivers, and what you've seen in the last couple of games has really come to fruition. Even that overtime loss they had at San Diego State, Cam Rising, once he entered the game late in the contest, played really well. So to me, it's really no coincidence that when you have an established quarterback that for one reason or another the coaching staff didn't think was ready for prime time, now to see him playing as well as he has been, definitely has been a huge huge positive for the Utes. And look, I mean, the Utes definitely have some very, very capable aerial targets. They have a good group of receiving tight ends. That's one aspect that you and I talked a lot about, that ASU did not do a great job with the BYU tight end about a month ago. Even in wins against UCLA and Stanford, the defense at times did have issues covering that position. So here we are Saturday night with a very familiar element that the defense is going to face once again, and we'll see how successful ASU can be. They also have a very, very talented wide receiver in Britton Covey, somebody who's a veteran, proven playmaker in this conference. Just a short story: Zach and I, when we were in Salt Lake City a month ago for the BYU game, we were subject to his highlight film while him and I were trying to enjoy dinner. That's a longer story for a much different time, but nonetheless, Covey is definitely one of those guys, really like a Ricky Parasol for ASU, if you will. He can take a 5-10 yard route and turn it into a 30-40 yard gain. So no different maybe than a Kyle Phillips from UCLA that ASU encountered a few weeks ago. So I think that, again, we can talk about just drawing back on previous experiences and really making sure that you don't make the same mistakes this time around. I think ASU does have experience in what Utah has to offer in terms of their passing attack to try to better combat it this time around. But when you talk about the Utes, you always talk about a very physical team. You talk about a team that runs the ball really, really well. That really hasn't been the case up until the last two games. And they're running back Tavian Thomas, who's really a carbon copy of Kalen Balaj, for those who remember him here at ASU, 6'2", 220. He did have some major fumbling issues early in the year that really not only hindered him, but I think hindered the entire Utah ground attack to begin with. It seems like he's doing much, much better. Obviously had a big game against USC in a victory last Saturday. So that's something that ASU is really going to have to be mindful, aside from the reemergence of the Utah passing game. But when I look at this ASU defense throughout 6 games, over 20 sacks, over 45 tackles for loss, to me the formula might be easier said than done, but really to put as much pressure as possible on an offensive line who has been very, very shaky at times, playing much better now than they have earlier in the year. That did hurt the pass protection for Charlie Brewer back then. Definitely hurt also their ground game. But if ASU is able to apply what really you would call the normal pressure, you don't want to take it for granted, but they've really been making life miserable for opposing running games, for opposing quarterbacks. That they really can do the same to Utah. That's really going to go a long, long way in slowing down an offense that I feel has slowly but surely really coming into their own, and definitely going to be one of the more challenging units the Sun Devils are going to face this season.
You talk about those aerial threats from Utah, and it's worth mentioning that ASU took one of those top aerial threats, Brian Thompson, wearing number 22, which is actually the number that I believe Aaron Lowe wore before he took Ty Jordan's number 2. So a very emotional homecoming for Brian Thompson heading back to Utah. Let's speak about this defense, because at this point in the season, usually we're talking about a defense where Utah has blown ASU out of the water statistically. That's not true this year, and maybe that's the effects of ASU having a talented defensive group this year. But with that in mind, what are some of the challenges and maybe even opportunities that the defense may pose?
Well, I think, Zach, I mean, usually when you look at the Utah defense, I mean, the reason that they are such a well-oiled machine unit is not only the obvious physicality aspect of their defense, but also they have usually a very good group of defensive backs. That really has not been the case at all. They did have some key injuries earlier in the year, and I think that really hurt them. You can look at the USC game, and I know it's really easy to say, look, USC could not run the ball well at all against Utah. They had to resort to the passing game. But ultimately, you look at the stat sheet, USC had 401 passing yards. I can't imagine that film session for the Utah defensive backs being a pleasant experience and something you just push aside, because at the end of the day, you did actually get that precious Pac-12 South win on the road. So if I'm Zach Hill, the ASU offensive coordinator, I'm seeing a lot of vulnerabilities I really can't exploit. Now, the running game for Utah has been better as of late, but still, in those 2 wins in Pac-12 play against Washington State and USC, the opponents for Utah have rushed more than 100 yards. I don't think it would be hyperbolic to say that the rushing game for both Washington State and Utah is anywhere close to the level of Arizona State. We saw what ASU did on the road, no less, against UCLA, against a better rushing defense than what Utah is going to present. So there are definitely a lot of opportunities for this passing game to really get back on track. I really was disappointed, especially in the second half. as to how this aspect of the ASU offense played, and I think Utah does offer them a great opportunity to really play as well as they have. Just a few weeks ago, the forecast, touch wood, does not call for any rain, any snow, any wind, so it should be conducive, you would think, for ASU's passing game to play better. But there's no doubt in my mind that ASU, as I always say, need to keep the offensive balanced in order to keep the opposing defense off balance. I think Utah is really mindful and racking their brain how to stop those trick plays that have been very, very effective for the Sun Devils on offense in recent weeks. So I think that if that's the formula that ASU has been really employing so well, especially against UCLA and Colorado when the offense was so balanced that the opposing defense really didn't have a lot of answers, I think that that's going to be crucial for ASU on Saturday night. So again, I mean, I know that ASU is running the ball pretty well, and they have to make sure that they do that if you want to take out the very boisterous crowd out of the game, moving the chains, which normally is done with running the ball well. That is definitely a proven formula, but I just see that this ASU passing game, much against UCLA on the road a few weeks ago, has a great opportunity to really put up some big numbers, take the pressure off the running game. Not that I don't think ASU's ground attack can play very, very well when the passing game is having an off day, but in my mind, if ASU can present a balanced offense, this should be a good result for the Sun Devils on Saturday night.
Before the BYU game, Herm Edwards spoke about how if you keep the game going for 4 quarters, the crowd can't possibly yell for 4 quarters. Spoiler alert, they did at LaVell Edwards Stadium. BYU fans would not be quiet the whole game, but part of that was because ASU kept them in the game, to be honest, Toad. So ASU looking to take Utah out of the game, and that takes out that big crowd element. So we've spoken about the crowd, the uncontrollable features of the stadium. We've spoken about the offense and defense. With all that in mind, Hode, how do you see ASU's second trip to the Beehive State pointing out?
Well, this is a really, really hard game to predict because, again, even though ASU is coming in as a favorite, they're just a slight favorite, and I think they do have some underdog elements. So I wouldn't be surprised if the coaching staff is saying, don't worry about the folks that are telling you they're your favorite in this game. There definitely are some aspects of this road game being a very, very loud environment, no different than BYU. You have to make sure you're not repeating the same mistakes that hurt you badly in Provo just about a month ago, repeat themselves in Salt Lake City on Saturday night. And we talk about the Aaron Lowe tragedy, and again, I know the crowd is going to be absolutely charged up. But you just kind of wonder how much off schedule did the fact that Utah moving their Monday activities to Sunday after a late kickoff at USC. Monday they traveled to Texas to the funeral. You just have to wonder that with all the good intentions that Utah has, really honoring the memory of Aaron Lowe, maybe there are some unintended consequences having the team playing with more emotion than passion. Maybe making mistakes are uncharacteristic for this team. I'm not saying it's a guarantee to happen, but I think you would be naive to think that there's not at least the opportunity for that to happen. So for ASU, as I mentioned earlier, really just to block out the noise and making sure that part of the blocking out the noise is not only your own focus, but just really playing well, especially on offense, just to make sure that you're moving those chains, having that ground attack really help you maintain possession. Much more than Utah. I think that ultimately defense and running game, when you have those two elements playing well, playing effectively, and really when you look at the halfway portion of the season, I think those are the two most consistent elements that have been working very, very well for Arizona State. So just because of those two aspects, I think that ASU is going to squeak out a win. I'm not going to say a dogfight because every time I say that, it does backfire on me. But truth be told, surprisingly enough, the games between Utah and ASU, no matter who comes on top, have not been close games at all. But maybe not a dogfight, but I am picking a close game. ASU to win 24-20.
I'll throw another number at you. 32 degrees, the low. The two of us will be dressed very warmly in Utah alongside our staff writer, Cole Topham, bringing you all the pre, during, and post-game coverage you need. Hey, as always, make sure you keep it locked in to DevilsDigest.com. While you're at it, give us a follow on Twitter at DevilsDigest. For Hode Rubino, I'm Zach Keenan. We will see you Saturday night in Salt Lake City.